مشاهدينا الكرام، أسعد الله أوقاتكم بكل خير. يسعدنا في هذا اللقاء وتحديدا بمناسبة استضافة دولة الكويت لأعمال المنتدى الإقليمي العربي السادس للحد من مخاطر الكوارث، والذي يأتي تحت شعار بناء مجتمعات عربية قادرة على الصمود من الفهم إلى العمل. ويسعدني أيضا في هذا اللقاء الخاص والذي يجمعني مع السيد كمال كيشور، الممثل الخاص للأمين العام للأمم المتحدة للحد من مخاطر الكوارث، ورئيس مكتب الأمم المتحدة للحد من مخاطر الكوارث. سعيدة جدا بوجودك معنا سيد كمال. وفي البداية، كيف تنظر إلى الأهمية الزمانية والأهمية المكانية وأيضا إلى الأهمية السياسية لاستضافة تحديدا دولة الكويت لهذا المنتدى للحد من مخاطر الكوارث؟
Thank you very much for that question. I think this event, the regional platform for disaster risk reduction for Arab states, comes at a very, very important time. In the last few years, we have seen exceptional disaster events in the region. We saw what happened when the dams were overwhelmed by extreme rainfall and stream flow in Libya. We saw what happened in Morocco in September 2023 when the earthquake occurred. We have had floods in Oman. We've had floods in UAE. In fact, in UAE, we had rainfall which has exceeded the historically high rainfall in that region since records began. So it's really important that we come together and see how we can make countries, communities in the region safer from all types of disasters, whether they are related to hydrometeorology, too much water, too little water, or they are related to geophysical hazards such as earthquakes. So it's really important that we come together and come up with strategies to deal with these issues in a sustained way over the long term. And that requires that we go beyond preparing ourselves to respond to disasters, to actually preventing the occurrence of disasters by taking certain measures, such as doing risk assessments and using those risk assessments to make sure that all our highways, airports, seaports, everything that we build is resilient to disasters as we know them now, but as they are likely to be in the future. And at the same time have strong early warning systems so that communities can be warned when there is an impending hazardous event, and they are able and capacitated to take steps to save their lives and livelihoods. Here, I would also like to say that there is already a lot of good work happening in the Arab states, which people even within the region don't know about. So this was a good moment to come together, exchange experiences and good practices, and see how we can come together to take this to another level.
سيد كمال، انطلاقا من أهمية المنتدى، كما تعلم من أهمية أعمال هذا المنتدى، نود معرفة تفاصيل أكثر عن أعمال وطبيعة عمل مكتب الأمم المتحدة للحد من مخاطر هذه الكوارث وأهم اختصاصاتها.
So my office, which is called UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, is in charge of ensuring that the world is focused on implementing the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction is a global framework which was adopted by 187 countries, including 22 countries that were present here in 2015 March, including Kuwait. And in that framework, the world committed to reduce losses related to disasters, number of deaths, number of people affected by disasters, economic losses, and infrastructure losses. And at the same time, increase access to early warning systems, increase plans and strategies for disaster risk reduction, and improve international cooperation in this area. So my job and my organization's job is to keep the world's focus on these 7 targets and ensure that all countries, governments, civil society organizations, private sector organizations, academic institutions are working together towards achieving these targets. So in this regard, there are a few things we do. Number one, we work with countries in improving the understanding of risk. How do we understand what is the likelihood of floods, landslides, cyclones, earthquakes, who will be affected by them, including elderly people, women and children, persons with disability, and what is it that we can do, how we can implement those things to reduce those impacts. So understanding of risk and ways of reducing that risk. The second thing we do is that we work with governments in ensuring that this understanding of risk is something that informs all development spending. So if you're building a port in an area where cyclones are likely to occur, so it's really important that the port infrastructure is able to withstand the maximum wind speed that is expected there, 200 kilometers per hour or 220 kilometers per hour. If you are building a new office infrastructure or a new power plant in an area where you expect earthquakes, so we have to do an assessment of what kinds of earthquakes will occur here, what is the kind of forces they will exert on the buildings, and ensure that we have building codes, we have engineering technology, we have engineering knowledge to ensure that all of this new investment is resilient to earthquakes. So that's really the essence, that it's not just about doing what happens after a disaster. It is really making sure that everything that we do, it in the first place prevents hazards from becoming disasters. In my organization, we say that there are no natural disasters. They're all man-made. An earthquake is a natural hazard. A cyclone is a natural hazard. A flood is a natural hazard. But when it interacts, when it affects people, economic assets, economic activity, which is vulnerable, then it becomes disastrous. In an earthquake, for example, it's not the earthquake that kills people. It's the weak buildings and infrastructure which kills people. So we really want to work with governments to ensure that this is a key thing. It's a key consideration in all development investment. And the third thing that we do is, in the last 2.5 years, the UN Secretary General launched this initiative called Early Warning for All, where we want to make sure that every person on the planet Earth has access to early warning for impending hazards. And this means not just work on the scientific and technical level, but also ensuring that there are good systems of communicating that information, and there are capacities at the local level to actually receive that warning and then know what to do with it. So it's good. It's one thing to tell somebody that a cyclone is coming, but if a cyclone is coming, what to do, where to go, how to protect yourselves, all sections of society, not just men but also women, not just elderly people but also children. So the whole society and all of society approach to responding to early warnings is also very important. So these are the three big things I want to highlight: assessing risk, making sure that the assessment of risk informs all investments in development, and number 3 is early warning. There are many other things we do, but in brief this is what we have.
نعم. طيب يعني سيد كمال، هذا بالنسبة لأعمال مكتب الأمم المتحدة بشأن هذا الأمر، مواجهة يعني المخاطر وما إلى ذلك، ومواجهة الكوارث سواء كانت يعني كما ذكرنا الطبيعية أو حتى الكوارث البشرية. طيب نود معرفة منك يعني أشكال الدعم التي يقدمها هذا المكتب اليوم، يعني هل هو فقط يعني نستطيع أن نقول دعم فني أم هناك أشكال أخرى لهذا الدعم؟
There are a number of things that we are discussing with the member states in this region where we can develop cooperation. But before I talk about that, I also have to say that these 22 member states, they are very different. There are some that have a lot of capacity, others that still need to build that capacity. There are some countries that have amongst the highest per capita GDP. There are other countries that have low per capita GDP. So it is really important that while we work with the region, we take a nuanced approach and approach different countries in a different way. With some countries, we can actually build on their experience and share with the others. With some other countries, we actually need to support them much more. Having said that, there are 3 or 4 areas which are emerging. One area is the whole area of resilient infrastructure and resilient real estate. There is a lot of investment in infrastructure as well as real estate happening here. We've been working with some of the Arab states to look at how the investment in real estate can be informed by risk consideration. There is, with them, we have developed a very good methodology for doing that assessment, an indicator framework, a scorecard. So that's very specific technical area of work, so that every investment that is made in new real estate is informed by risk consideration. So similarly with on resilient infrastructure, there has been discussion to come up with some sort of a facility here which will promote disaster and climate resilient infrastructure. So that's one. The second is, as you probably know, this region has a lot of innovation happening. You know, there are a number of countries that are investing in development of space-based technologies, use of unarmed aerial vehicles, in other words, drones. You also have countries that are very interested in application of artificial intelligence. So this is an area of work we want to develop as to how we use the emerging technologies in a coherent way so that we can get a better handle on the disaster problem. Here, I just want to underline that we don't want to use technology just because it's fashionable. I think it should really address a specific problem. I think so that is the second area. The third is there are some countries, where, particularly with regards to disasters related to water, there are some common themes emerging. If you look at Libya, where there was this problem with the irrigation dam which was overwhelmed by too much rainfall, similar challenges are being faced in Iraq as well. So we want to look at how we can work with the water sector in ensuring that they are prepared for tomorrow. When the rainfall events will become much more extreme, they will become much more frequent, and in that case, how the management of such water infrastructure like these dams will have to evolve. A fourth and final area is on heat action. You know, all across the world, episodes of extreme heat are increasing. And as you probably know, this region is amongst the most heat-stressed regions. In fact, the highest ever temperature recorded in this part of the world was here in this country, in Kuwait. And at the same time, communities and countries in this region have had centuries of experience of dealing with heat, in the way they've built traditionally, the way clothing patterns have evolved over the years. So we want to build on that traditional knowledge as well. But how do we take this to the next level so that it is relevant and applicable for the challenges of 21st century? For example, when there is extreme heat, the power transmission system gets affected. The road transport network gets affected. So how are we going to prepare these infrastructure systems to deal with extreme heat? So one thing that we've discussed is, can we do a follow-up conversation here with some of the member states to look at how we are going to prepare ourselves for extreme heat episodes, not just for the next year or next few years, but for coming decades.
نعم، يعني كما ذكرت سيد كمال، يعني هو تحدي كبير اليوم أمام العالم أجمع. طيب ما هو المطلوب اليوم من هذه الدول ومن هذه المنظمات للحد من كل هذه المخاطر؟ يعني كما ذكرت اليوم يعني تعصف هذه المخاطر بالعالم أجمع، سواء يعني كانت هذه الكوارث، يعني كما ذكرنا هذه كوارث طبيعية كانت أم حتى كوارث يعني بشرية. طيب ما هو العمل؟ ما هو المطلوب من هذه الدول والمنظمات؟
So there are many things that member states need to do to address these emerging challenges, but let me highlight the top 3 challenges. I think the first thing is that they have to put more resources into prevention. Traditionally, what has happened is that countries have put a lot of resources in post-disaster response. A disaster happens, you provide biscuits and blankets and tents. But we need to put more money now in prevention, so that these things do not happen. More proactive approach. So I think that's one really key thing. Later next month, we will be holding a global policy forum on financing for disaster risk reduction in Oslo, where Kuwait will also participate, where we will discuss this issue. How do we encourage countries to put a bit more money in prevention, so not just on response, because we know that if you spend $1 or 1 dinar in prevention, you get benefit of 7 dinars.
That's correct.
10 dinars. So prevention is better than cure, but why are we not putting money in prevention? So that's one. The second thing is that it's really important that countries now invest in local level institutions. So all the 22 states that we met over the last few days, all of them have national strategies. Either they are ready or they are about to be, ready and validated and adopted. But not many countries still have strategies that make things happen at the local level. So how do we localize disaster risk management? That is really, really important. And the third is that there is a big gap between science and policy. So scientists are doing fantastic work and policymakers are doing their own work, and they are not talking to each other. If we can bridge this gap, if the policy making can be a bit more evidence-based, scientific evidence-based, then I think we will make rapid progress.
طيب بالتأكيد يعني سيد كمال، كما تعلم هناك يعني العديد من المبادرات الفردية كانت أم حتى المبادرات الجماعية، وفي البعض منها يعني خاص بذوي الهمم وأيضا للشباب. ما رأيك بكل هذه المبادرات وهل أتت جدواها أم لا؟
I think this is very important that in all our work on disaster risk reduction, we take a multi-stakeholder approach. And at this event, for example, on the opening ceremony itself, we heard an inspirational speaker with disability on how he's championing the cause of disability inclusion. So that when we do early warning system, we ensure that when the early warning is disseminated, it meets the needs of persons with disability. The assistive technologies meet the needs of people who are hearing impaired or visually impaired, and they are able to first access the early warning. Second, the systems that are there for responding to the early warning also take into account their disability. And in this, I must underline that we don't have to always look at persons with disability as vulnerable people. Of course, they have their own set of vulnerabilities, but they have their own set of capacities as well. They have their own imagination, their own resourcefulness, their own initiative as well. So it's really important that we include them in this process. So that's one stakeholder group, the stakeholder group of persons with disability. But there are others, women group, youth group. I think one of the key emphasis of this platform has been youth engagement, because when you invest in youth, when you work with youth, you not just make your present safe, but also future safe. These people will be leaders of the future. So it's really important that we involve them in this whole process of disaster risk reduction.
يعني سيد كمال، كما تعلم الكويت قامت ويعني أتمت صياغة إعلان الكويت للحد من مخاطر الكوارث. باعتقادك متى سيتم مناقشة هذا الإعلان الخاص للحد من مخاطر الكوارث؟
See, the implementation of this strategy has to begin right this moment. We don't have to wait. In fact, many elements of the declaration are already being implemented. So countries of this region are taking issues related to disaster risk and disaster risk reduction very, very seriously. I really hope that when we meet in June as a global platform, by then we can actually show that we've swiftly moved ahead with the implementation of the commitments made here, and we are able to showcase it to the world how this region is addressing disaster risk reduction issues. What are they learning from it? What is it that the world can learn from it? What is it that this region can get from other parts of the world as to what is the comparative experience in other places which can benefit this region? So we really have to move forward with a spirit of urgency and with a spirit of cooperation and solidarity. And in this context, I think it's really important to underline that having this platform in Kuwait has been very significant. Kuwaiti people have extended warm hospitality. They have done a fabulous job of hosting this event. You have won 1,000 hearts today. Those of us who came to this event and spent the week here, everything has been very, very well organized with great attention to detail. And equally, the intellectual leadership of Kuwait, the championship of that issue was reflected in the professionalism with which the whole event was organized. So I feel very encouraged about the future of disaster risk reduction in the region. And I really hope that we can leave behind a world where each and every child in this region will be safer from droughts and floods and earthquakes and cyclones of the future.
نعم.
Thank you.
وصلنا معك يعني سيد كمال إلى ختام هذا اللقاء الخاص. شكرا لك على حضورك معنا في هذا اللقاء أكيد، وشكرا لتخصيص وقت لهذا اللقاء الخاص بمناسبة استضافة الكويت لأعمال المنتدى الإقليمي العربي السادس للحد من مخاطر الكوارث. كل الشكر لك، شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا.
مشاهدينا الكرام، الشكر موصول لكم أكيد لهذا أو لهذه المتابعة في هذا اللقاء الخاص. دمتم بحفظ الله ورعايته، في أمان الله.